Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Washington Monthly's weekly politics roundtable. Today is July 21st, 2025. On today's show, is the Trump-Putin bromance really over? We're going to get a perspective from a special guest who's reporting from on the ground in Kyiv. Plus, Congress cancels Elmo and political risks of the Jeffrey Epstein saga on President Donald Trump. I am Ann Kim, contributing editor for Washington Monthly. I'm joined today by Paul Glastris, the monthly's editor-in-chief, politics editor Bill Scher, executive editor for digital Matt Cooper, and special guest at Tamar Jacoby, who is a contributing writer to the monthly and director of the New Ukraine Project at the Progressive Policy Institute. Welcome, Tamar. It's great to see you.
It's nice to be here.
Welcome, everyone else. Good to see you guys. So Tamar, we'd like to start with you. Trump, in the last week or so, has seemingly done this 180 turn in his relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. For a while, they seemed like best buddies, but last week he was threatening tariffs on Russia's trading partners if Russia didn't agree to a ceasefire. He's allowing arms to flow back into Ukraine via third-party arrangement. You recently wrote this great piece for the monthly asking whether this about-face is permanent. So can you talk a little bit about that and how Ukrainians are feeling about all of this?
Sure. I mean, I think Trump, Trump is a single-minded person, and he has had his idea that he was going to make peace in Ukraine. And he's finally figured out after 6 months that it's Putin who's stymieing that goal. And so he's ticked. And when he's ticked, he acts out of that irritation. He doesn't hold back. He doesn't wait and see. He doesn't count to 10. He lashes out. So I think the underlying situation of Trump wanting to get respect, admiring Russia, admiring Putin, thinking Russia is a great country and wanting a great America to have a relationship with a great Russia, and finding sort of irritation with Ukraine, which I think Trump has long been irritated with Ukraine. I don't think that underlying situation has changed, and I don't think Trump is completely wise about what a wily and aggressive person Putin is, but I think he's annoyed that he's not getting his way. And so for now, he's threatening to punish Putin. He hasn't punished him yet, and so it's still only talk, but he's threatening to punish Putin. And the most important thing for Ukraine is that he's opened up a spigot to send weapons. He's not going to give weapons, as we have traditionally, foreign aid is traditionally structured. Big countries give smaller countries weapons. He's going to sell weapons to Europe, who will then give them to Ukraine. But honestly, for Ukraine, it's a distinction without a difference. They're glad to get the weapons. It's in some ways it's more reliable that they're flowing through their friends, the Europeans, and not from Trump. They feel kind of a little more self-reliant. When you're relying on somebody else's favors, you're very precarious situation. When there's sort of a deal in place, or when you're even going to offer something, it feels better. It's a little more in your control. So for the Ukrainians, the idea that air defenses are coming is really the important thing. For Trump, there is some question about how long will it last, and what will happen eventually with Putin. But for now, Ukrainians are greatly relieved. I mean, again, the weapons aren't there yet, but the missile defenses are allegedly on the way.
Now, Tamar, before we came on the show, you were talking a little bit about concerns of for safety in Kyiv these days. I mean, it's not like Putin has stopped his offensives.
No, it's gotten a lot worse, actually. So, I mean, one number sort of says it. Just a year ago, a typical air alert on a typical night coming, to my apartment, how I experienced it, was 20 drones. Now it's 700. So, that's like, I can't even do the math. What is it? 35 times more. And the point is to terrorize. So how one feels about it matters. And it is much scarier. I mean, it used to be, you even if there was an air alert in the country, the chances that it was in Kyiv were sort of low, and then the chances that it was in your neighborhood were even lower. So occasionally you would hear outside your window a big noise, but you would hear sort of one noise, and then it would probably go away. Now it's like being in the middle of a firefight. It's literally like every few seconds. And I in the whole 3 years I've been there, I've been to the basement about 4 or 5 times. Now I go every time there's an alert in Kyiv. And a lot of people are doing that. A lot of people who blew it off for years, literally, are now taking shelter. And in the morning, people talk about it. No, it used to be kind of I don't know if it was a macho thing or just a, we're resilient thing. You didn't say, hi, how are you? How'd you handle it last night? Now everybody says, what'd you do last night? And, how was it in your neighborhood? And how's your kid handling it? And stuff like that. So to the degree that it's about terrorizing people, I don't know that people are terrorized yet, but it's not something you can blow off anymore. And I think the on the other hand, Ukrainians are Ukrainians, and people are I judge by the kind of yuppie kind of young professionals in my building where I live. They're still getting married and having babies and buying apartments and going about their lives, and you're always sort of thinking, well, there's going to be an answer around the corner. Right now Russia's sort of got the upper hand, but we have some new interceptors coming from Eric Schmidt's company in Poland, and we have more Patriots are coming. People. I don't hear a lot of people saying we're going to leave. I don't hear anybody saying we're going to give up. So it's a combination of more scared, but also Ukrainian resilience.
Tamar, in one of your more recent stories, you said that the average Ukrainian that you're talking to looks at the trickle of weapons that Trump has deigned to turn back on and kind of say, well, it's not much, right? I think initially it was a handful of Patriot missiles that would be used up in an hour or two on a typical night. And my understanding is none of this is new money from the Trump administration. So far, it's just his agreeing not to stop the aid that the Biden administration promised.
That's right. There's no new money from Trump, and I don't expect there will ever be new money from Trump. Where there's going to be new money injected is Europeans are going to pay for things. And so Patriots are great big missile systems on trucks that fire something called interceptors. And 10 Patriot batteries, 10 Patriot systems, that would change life dramatically in Ukraine. It's 10 interceptors that don't do much. 10 interceptors is just 10 bullets, basically. I mean, they're big $1 million bullets, but they're bullets. It's the guns that are important. And I mean, they're not literally guns, they're launchers and radars and what have you. But the idea now is that Germany is going to give 2 systems, and Norway is going to give 1 system, and there may be some other systems somewhere, and that will make a big difference. The point, and again, this gets a little techie. Sorry, here, Miltech, as we call it. What Patriots do is they shoot down ballistic missiles. They don't affect these 700 drones. You don't want to use $1 million Patriot interceptor to shoot down a couple $1,000 drone. But there's new tech coming on. Again, Eric Schmidt, Mr. Google, Eric Schmidt, has invented something new that he's making in Poland that Ukraine's very eager to get, that they're hoping we'll be able to shoot down these drones. There are other things kind of in the works. Lasers and that kind of thing would be the best. We're not there yet. But the whole war is a race. One side comes up with something, and then the other side comes up with something to counter it, and then the first side comes up with something to counter that, and we're just in that technological race right now. Ukraine's on kind of the losing end of it, but we hope it's temporary.
Well, speaking of the losing end, isn't there talk of providing Ukraine, sale, not gift, with offensive weapons, long-range missiles and so forth, and the ability to strike further into Russia? That has been happening a little bit over the years. The Russians keep moving their their military assets for, just out of reach. There's talk of maybe giving Ukraine more reach.
It was typical Trump trying to have it both ways. He had one day, he had a call with Zelensky where he said, can you reach Moscow and St. Petersburg if I give you this kind of missile? And they talked about it. No one heard the tape, but it was reported as, can you? And so that came out in the news. And the next day, the White House said, oh, he wasn't giving them permission. He was just asking if they could. So for now, there's no permission to use Western weaponry for these deep strikes. Ukraine does deep strikes with drones, but that doesn't accomplish, it did accomplish a lot on that time that they hit all the airplanes. It doesn't generally accomplish that much. But I mean, winning on the battlefield, it's hard. It's a little bit hard to imagine the military victory of either side at this point. It's so stalemated, and so it is hard to kind of imagine the end game. And it is got to be some combination. I mean, I think I don't quite see it yet, but I think it's going to have to be some combination of economic pressure on Putin and more power on the battlefield, to the point where Putin, and more staying power from the West, to the point where Putin says, there's no point in going on with this. How many years are we going to have to do this? Now, will that ever happen? Maybe not. I mean, he started this war by saying we fought the Swedes for 12 years, in the whatever 17th century or something, or 20 years. I don't know. There's some horrible long number. I forget what it is. But, maybe there's no point at which he says, is this worth it for us? But so I think the West has to do both. It's the economic pressure, much tougher economic pressure, more weaponry, more long range weaponry, and just more, showing that they're determined. But I don't pretend I have the end game solved, and I don't know anybody who does.
Well, we talked on a previous show that, the best outcome would be Donald Trump getting bored with trying to do anything there, moving on to other things, and allowing, in a kind of benign, non-involved way, for U.S. weaponry to make it to Ukraine. And that is kind of maybe where we're going, right?
Yeah, I think what we were talking about was when it looked like Trump was going to impose a bad peace. I mean, there was at least 6 months of real fear that Trump was going to impose a completely unfair bad peace. And that was when I was sort of, half jokingly, half for real, hoping he would turn away. I don't think, Ukraine can't win the war without American intelligence, American weaponry, however it gets here. So we don't want Trump to, a benign neglect for his peace effort would help, but I don't think that's the end game for how the war ends. Sadly.
Mm.
And
Do you
everyone's
see?
learning on the fly, right? I mean, you had one of the terrific pieces you wrote recently was about the infantry, and the infantry having to rethink its role in an age of drones. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to be embedded with them for a while?
Yeah, the infantry were great. I mean, I don't know, I guess maybe it's a journalist's, it's a fault of journalists, the excitement of being there with the guys. But the infantry are the toughest of the tough. The infantries are, the people say prostitution's the oldest profession. I think infantry is the oldest profession, actual people like fighting other people, almost hand to hand. And I stumbled on this infantry unit and I got to spend some time with them. And the warfare, the Ukraine war is transforming military technology. These drones are flying over the battlefield all the time. And so what used to be trenches fairly close to each other, if you've ever been to a World War One battlefield, the trenches, there's a no man's land in between, but it's not very big. You could run across it, if there was no machine gun fire coming at you. Now the no man's land is 15 miles wide. And because the other side has drones flying over all the time and can see everything that happens in that zone. And so, literally, not to get too graphic, but you don't want to get out of the trench to take a pee. I mean, a drone will see you and kill you. And so it's hard to get to the trench. You have to walk 15 miles. And then once you're there, you can't leave. It used to be like in a trench, you stayed a day maybe, or maybe max 3 days was considered a long haul. Now you stay 30 days because the walk in and out is so terrifying. And so these poor guys fighting close to, the infantry, in a way their lives are better because they have these new things in the sky that can hit the other side. But in another way, their lives are terrible now because the other side has these new things in the sky that can hit them all the time. So we're sort of seeing an intermediate, at some point, I think the military technology is going to get more and more and more automated. So you won't have so much infantry. But right now you have this situation where you have this old fashioned infantry on the ground there, caught between the robots, so to speak. And so again, do I know exactly where it's going? No. But I mean, the way war is getting transformed by the technological innovation is just astonishing.
Tamar, what's your personal take on where Donald Trump is going to go from here? Do you think that he's going to be, frustrated with Putin in the long term and work toward that end game you were talking about earlier? Or do you think he's going to do yet another about face? Like how much trust do the Ukrainians have in what Trump will do?
Trump, I would be a much richer person. I would be better
Really?
features and I don't know what else. Not to mention, award-winning genius journalist. But no, I mean, I don't think he's sort of given up. Again, his hope of the two big men from the two great countries making deals and being in some kind of relationship. And I think there's a way that Putin may continue to thwart that. I mean, somebody told me something early on, right after Trump got elected. I was with a friend, a diplomat from a northern European country, and he said, and we were worrying, is Trump going to impose a bad peace? And he said something that I've thought of every day, many times since: don't worry, Putin will F it up. Because the point being that is whenever we get close to some kind of deal, to some kind of peace, to some kind of thing, Putin will resist. And if Trump really wants peace, Putin will continue to frustrate him for a long time. I mean, does Trump really want peace? I don't know, but he's committed his appropriate to making peace. And I think Putin is going to continue to frustrate that. So for them to get close, Trump will have to give up that goal. Will he? I don't know. But I wouldn't trust anything. I mean, I wouldn't, I wouldn't trust it. Putin's not. Is Trump going to remain in a stable position? Who knows? And I think the Ukrainians feel the same way, which is why it's better that the weaponry might be coming from Europe now, even if it still depends on Trump in some way.
And this sort of tangled backdoor way of providing aid and arms came from Ukraine, right? They're the ones that said, look, we have a problem with the new president, Trump. We're getting screwed. Let's find a way to get him to say yes. And we'll make it, we'll buy them from you and you don't have to deal directly with us. We can go through the Europeans. And it's kind of a Rube Goldberg system, but it serves Ukraine.
Absolutely. And I mean, the European, it's long been clear that America was going to eventually back away and Europe has more of a stake in the war. I mean, what Europe knows that is not true in America is if Putin wins in Ukraine, he's coming there next. I mean, maybe not with tanks, but in some form or other. And so Europeans it's not just we mean well, it's our own skins. So Europeans have a real stake in finding the money, finding the weaponry, doing whatever they have to do to help Ukraine, to help the fighting stay in Ukraine, to be honest, to be purely 100% cynical about it. And so there was always been a hope that there would be a gradual shift away from America paying for everything to Europe paying for and supplying more. And so this is a way that this speeds that up. And I mean, no one in Ukraine is going around. Ukrainians aren't sentimental or hopeful that other people will be sentimental. No one's going around saying, oh, the Americans used to give us things and now they sell them. Everybody understands it completely. I mean, it's not, and it was Zelensky's idea.
We are seeing in Europe now a little bit of real signs that they're themselves rearming, right?
There is. I mean, Europe. They've been talking a good game for since the first full-scale invasion in February 2022, and they've been talking a better game. They finally, as you say, are appropriating some money, meeting each other, making plans, changing their national plans. It's a constant ferment. Will it come to fruition, and will it come to fruition in time? Big questions. And how clever will Putin be in figuring out how to divide and divide them from America and divide them from each other and get there before they're ready and all that kind of stuff? No one would predict. I mean, it's, just to reflect for a minute, I mean, it's a grim situation in Kyiv now, but no one is expecting it to be anything but grim for a while. And so the key is, are Ukrainians equipped to go on fighting? And are they equipped to continue to play that sort of cat and mouse catch up technological game? I would say yes. And so that's sort of the job ahead. It is scary. It's not always fun to be there in the current moment. But it's no one expected it to be all over happy peace this week. So it's an ongoing war.
I don't want to dominate the questioning. Others should jump in, but I do have one final one, and that is from a very crass national interest geostrategic point of view, not taking Ukraine out of it, but just seeing it in broader strokes. Is the continued war helping degrade Russia? With Russia being the problem, Russia being and
unfortunately not really, because there's been Putin's put the whole economy on a war footing, and they're manufacturing many more drones, missiles, all kinds of things. And for now, it's keeping the economy humming. It's overheating the economy, and that's potentially a crunch. But Russia's not on the verge of collapse. And again, this kind of, if you start to read Russian history, as I have, you see Russia has lived like this for a long time. I mean, Peter the Great had the biggest army in Europe. And it worked for a while to sustain the economy, and then it started sucking the life out of the rest of the economy. And I mean, the patterns are not new, sadly.
Well, I guess the question is, when does it start sucking the life out of the Russian economy?
Well, people think that, again, it depends who you read. And I'm not an economist, and I don't know the Russian economy, but people I take seriously are starting to say, if we really applied the pressure now, we could have a big effect. Now, would we have enough of an effect to stop it? But it's the oil money, it's the oil revenues that are the key thing. So you have to stop you have to stop the Chinese and the Indians from buying the oil. And then you have to stop the components, that the German and American industrial components that managed to sneak into Russia through Turkey and I don't know where
Kazakhstan,
else.
Right?
Every time a missile falls in Kyiv, a bunch of Ukrainians go and retrieve it and take it apart. And what's inside? A bunch of American and German technology. And so we've got to both stop the money and stop that technology leak, for want of a better.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tamar, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And please stay safe.
Yeah, stay safe.
Stay safe. Our special guest this morning was Tamar Jacoby. She is contributing writer to Washington Monthly. Please find all of her terrific reportage at WashingtonMonthly.com. She's also the director of the New Ukraine Project for the Progressive Policy Institute. Tamar, we hope to see you again on this show. So
I'm sure you will see me.
Yes,
we'll look forward to it.
Unless one of those missiles gets in the way.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Please stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Right. Take care.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, guys. So let's turn now to the controversy over Jeffrey Epstein, which is turning out to be almost as bizarre as the original conspiracy theory itself. So there's this whole thing about Epstein's client list. He was a convicted financier who was found dead in his cell of apparent suicide. MAGA has been obsessed with the Jeffrey Epstein files forever. And Pam Bondi, Attorney General and Deputy Director of the FBI, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, FBI Director Kash Patel, they all came to power on this promise to expose the Epstein files. And now they've all said nothing to see here. In the meantime, you have this Wall Street Journal article that just published about this very cryptic and very racy birthday note and doodled by none other than Donald Trump. So maybe there is something to see here. What do you guys make of all of this and whether it's a real threat to the viability of the Trump presidency?
At the moment, I would still say no. Look, who knows precisely what's there, but Trump and Epstein had enough of a falling out far enough back that I don't think, we're going to see, Epstein pimping for Trump documented. We might. I mean, Jonathan Alter has a good piece on our website this morning from his extensive interviews with Michael Wolff, who's sitting on hours and hours of interview tapes with Epstein. I think Alan Dershowitz made a good point in the Wall Street Journal that, look, why would you make a list? Criminals generally don't. If you had, you would have destroyed it much earlier in the prosecutions. And you don't necessarily need to, do that. So it's obviously, it is, Trump is getting his just desserts, right? He fans conspiracy theories, fans the flames, and then he finds it hard to douse the fire. The arsonist is complaining. But whether it's going to, in the long run, affect the president's popularity, the support of his base, his ability to pass things in a Republican majority Congress, I still don't think so.
Bill, Paul, do you guys agree with that? Do you have other thoughts?
Well, I don't think it's going to necessarily impact his ability to pass legislation in Congress. But we do see fissures in sort of, MAGA grass tops, which feed news cycles. If there's intra-party conflict, you get media attention. Donald Trump has gotten as far as he has by being a conspiracy theorist. Theorizing is a key factor in the MAGA coalition. It positions yourself as fully outside the establishment or the so-called deep state. You are the true truth teller. You're not cowed by any institutions, whether they're government or non-government or media. And that forges this very deep bond that you are sending somebody as like a heat-seeking truth missile. It's going to blow up all these things that you think are devilish. And Trump is now trying to contain it by saying nothing to see here. This is, I think he even said in a True Social post, we could give them some stuff from the grand jury bill. It'll never be enough for them. Which is the dynamic back in the birther days when Donald Trump demanded the long-form birth certificate of Barack Obama, and they finally got a birth certificate, and that wasn't good enough. He knows why conspiracy theories can never be fully put to rest. And so there's reason to believe this is going to be a churn, an undercurrent over the next several months that he can't. I mean, even if there really isn't like a literal client list, I mean, what probably is the case, and forgive me for meandering and rambling on, there probably is something in the files that says so-and-so gave a deposition and named person X or person Y. And there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute those people. And so under normal course of business, you don't release those names and drag their reputations through the mud. And so Donald Trump would probably have reason to say there's not, even if we were to release these documents, we would redact names. But that, of course, will only feed more conspiracy theories. So it's a no-win situation in that respect, and therefore it's something that's going to be a drag on him going forward, even if it doesn't mean it's going to prevent him from passing bills or exerting executive power in other ways.
I think both of you I agree with everything that you both said. The one thing is he's behaving in a way that is really bizarre. And for about a week, he seemed to have used every trick in the book to get people off the scent in a way that sounds like somebody who is lying, right? And it seems to me there are two possibilities. One, he somewhat, but even more so, the people around him, like Pam Bondi, use the conspiracy theory to gain power. And now they're caught admitting that that was a lie. There really wasn't any there. Or there's a there, right? And it may not be a client list, but he's afraid that he did something that there's a record of that no one wants out. Certainly he doesn't want out, and I don't see, those are the two possible explanations for his bizarre behavior. As to whether it's going to recede, the New York Times today has a story saying that Trump finally has figured out how to make this thing recede or even go away, and that is by attacking the press. They're attacking this Wall Street Journal story. They're attacking Rupert Murdoch. Most people, liberals don't understand how much MAGA hates Rupert Murdoch. They think, Murdoch is part of MAGA, but he's too in. He and his networks and outlets have been fair weather Trump fans, and MAGA base knows that. So, but I don't know if the New York Times story is correct, that now Trump has something that quiets his base. They can be angry at the media rather than at him, or they're just sort of reporting the spin. Time will tell. But I guess I in the end agree with Bill. This is certainly not good for Donald Trump. I don't know where it goes, but I don't know that it's going to undermine his ability to get things done. But it adds to the slippage that is there in every other respect in his popularity and so forth.
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting Reuters poll that came out late last week that found that 69% of Americans believe that the government is hiding something around Epstein. And one interesting number there is that only 35% of Republicans approve of how Trump is handling that case. Now, of course, this was before the Wall Street Journal article and now the new enmity against the Wall Street Journal and the media generally. So we'll see what that effect is. So as far as
can I just say another thing? It's illegal. It's basically illegal to release depositions from grand juries, right? Either they're not going to release very much, they're going to redact it, or the courts are going to tell them they have to redact it. So this is going to play out in a way that the base who cares about this is not going to like the end result. Moreover, as our friend Josh Marshall pointed out last week, the issue is not any deposition. We don't even know what grand jury he's talking about. The issue is all the evidence that the feds grabbed from Jeffrey Epstein's homes when he was arrested the second time. And, nobody's in the Trump world is talking about that. That's where that's what the base really wants.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have to ask you guys about the Democratic response to all of this. You've got people like Ro Khanna, who found common cause now with Tom Massey to file legislation, demanding the release of the Epstein files. And I'm wondering, and now Trump, of course, has claimed in his defense that this is all, or one of his defenses was that this was now all a Democratic hoax. So what would your recommendation be to Democratic electeds to stay out of it and let it play out, or do what Ro Khanna is doing and jump in with both feet and fan the flames? What's the better strategy?
I mean, I lean towards what Ro Khanna is doing. I think asking to force Congress to vote on this stuff is fair game. Where I am a little reticent, and I wrote about this at the Monthly last week, I wouldn't want Democrats to strictly go into fight fire with fire mode. because the longer range objective, in my opinion, is to get us out of this cycle of conspiracy theorizing, to have our politics be dominated by conspiracy theorizing. That doesn't serve Democrats well. Democrats are a governing party. They should be focusing on serious issues, and to feed a notion of deep cynicism and skepticism in the electorate that everything is inherently rotten throughout all institutions is a political landscape that will only lead to more demagoguery. It's hard because you have a guy in charge now who was being an open criminal in all sorts of ways, not even hiding it. So I don't want to be glib about that and minimize it. But I think there's more of an opportunity here to say, hey, people, there are demagogues in our midst who are trying to exploit you with pushing conspiracy theories when it serves their political interests, and then look away when it no longer serves their political interests. And let's get over that and get back to real governing again. I think that
Yeah.
should be the North Star.
Yeah, and I think there's also a page from George W. Bush in 2000 who basically said who capitalized on the ick factor after Monica Lewinsky, even though Clinton had come back and was relatively popular. He wisely played on the aftertaste from that and made a big sort of turn the page, restore honor to the Oval Office. Now, I think Al Gore is a more honorable figure, but leaving that aside, I don't think that's a bad place for Democrats to be. And we just capitalize on the general ick that people don't really want to be hearing about, pimping underage women.
Yeah, I agree, and I would add, this is a uniquely damaging story for Donald Trump because his base doesn't believe him. Ro Khanna partnering with a member of Congress who represents that base is probably smart politics. But this is one where, in general, you don't get in the way of your enemy destroying himself. And the more it becomes a Democratic talking point, the more you allow Trump to sort of move his base away, right? You misdirect and make it about my enemies on the left.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in the last few minutes we have remaining, I do want to ask about one other very large story that happened last week, which is the passage of the rescissions package. Congress essentially decided to cede more of its power, its central power on Article 1, which is the power of the purse, to the executive. They approved a $9.4 billion rescissions package, clawing back money that had already appropriated funds for foreign aid, public broadcasting, including money for NPR and PBS. The White House now says that more rescission packages are coming. And I'm beginning to think why we bothered even having a Congress at all.
Well, this is actually going to be my column for tomorrow. I'm working on it right now. I think Democrats have every reason. So let's just do a little bit of setup here. Every fiscal year, Congress passes appropriations to keep government agencies open. And that's done that's called discretionary spending. Congress has discretion over how much gets spent per year, which is different than mandatory spending, which has to be at a certain level based on policies like Social Security and Medicare. What often happens, since the individual appropriations bills get gummed up because the parties can't agree, they end up doing these slapdash things when the fiscal year begins, whether it's a continuing resolution or it's an omnibus or a minibus, some sort of miscellaneous bill to kind of get everything through over the finish line for us a few months, and maybe do one stopgap after another to get through the fiscal year. So they did 3 of those in fiscal year 2025. The last one was in March that Trump signed, and the rescissions bill is through a quirk in the law. You can scale back those appropriations not through a bipartisan process that we have to get over a Senate filibuster, but through a partisan process that you can circumvent the filibuster. So they essentially undercut the bipartisan agreement that they had to get through this fiscal year. Now we're heading into fiscal year 2026. It starts October 1st. So they're in the midst of negotiation to pass those bills, again, either individually or more likely through some sort of, omnibus package. And Democrats have every reason to say, forget it. You're on your own, kids. Not only you can't even say this is some kind of one-off exception to the rule. Oh, it's just $9 billion. It's just public broadcasting and a little foreign aid. We won't do it again. The budget director has said, we're going to do it again. We're going to have another one. That even said the appropriations process should be less bipartisan. If that's what you want, go for it. Now, the catch is that we has had a so-called budget reconciliation process, the so-called one big beautiful bill, where you can circumvent the filibuster. You can't do discretionary spending through that under current law. Mm-hmm. So if Democrats are pulling out of this process, well, how does the government stay open? In my mind, there's two ways to do that. One is that Republicans could change the rules. They're not exactly so enamored with norms. So if you want to change the rules on a party line basis to keep the government open, you wanted partisan, go figure it out. Or they could say, hey, we're sorry, Democrats. We'll put a clause in this bill that says this is inoculated from rescissions, and we won't do it that way anymore. I don't think it's going to happen, of course, but those are the two ways out of it. And it's not the Democrats to figure it out, because they've already said flat out they don't want this to be bipartisan anymore. So good luck, kids.
Yeah, and Republicans have been saying for a long time, at least some of them, about a return to regular order. So, we've had too many of these big budget deals for the last 15 years or so. We're not going through the committee process. Congress is not working the way it's supposed to. We have all these deadlines get broken, last minute deals between four people in a room, bills written at the last minute that no one reads. I think the more Democrats are on the side of regular order, if Trump wants to get rid of the education department, fine. Here's what you have to do. You pass a law. You can't just have the OMB guys close the offices and say you're complying with the law. And I think that's a good place to be, at least in terms of policy. I don't know politically what it gets you, but it's at least on the right side of history.
Yeah, and with these rescissions, the Republican Congress is saying, again, we will do whatever Donald Trump wants, even if it makes our jobs harder, even if it makes our reelections harder. I wonder if it's maybe better than just letting Donald Trump have full reign to decide how things are spent. At least Congress is bellying up and after the fact, authorizing the cuts that the White House unconstitutionally made. But boy, we're getting right at the edge of a system where Congress doesn't matter on the number one constitutional power it has, which is the power of the budget.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to be fair on the rescissions, I mean, this is in the law. There is an Empowerment Act that creates this rescissions process. The president asks, and the Congress can vote. They voted for it. When they were, it just they can do it on a party line vote, on a simple majority vote, which is legal but dishonorable, because you have to scrap the agreement that you made to get these appropriations passed in the first place. Other stuff like decimating the education department, decimating U.S. aid, mass firings, these are unilateral acts that don't involve Congress, and whether are all legal or not is still being litigated, though the Supreme Court has largely waived a lot of them through, at least on a temporary basis. All of it in terms of spirit of the Constitution. The Constitution is not designed to be tyranny of the majority. It's designed to have checks and balances. The minority still has a voice. Minority still has a role. And that's the way it has been, that no matter what, the minority gets some say in the appropriation, some say in raising and how the debt limit gets raised. If they don't want that anymore, which is what Russ Voigt, the budget director, is saying, all right, then you own everything. Don't try to give a bipartisan sheen to it. Don't expect Democrats to help you along and fill the procedural gaps. You do it. You own it. You explain it to the public in 2026.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And the last time Congress did pass a rescissions package was back in the 90s under Bill Clinton, I believe, right? So we're entering a period that's not normal by any stretch of the imagination. So it's a final question for you guys. As usual, what are you watching for this week? Any takers?
Well, Trump has weighed in on the Washington football team, the Commanders, saying that he might jam up the deal that's been struck to build a new stadium in the District of Columbia unless they return to their rejected name, the Redskins. And he's made a similar threat without the stadium leverage to Cleveland, which changed the name of its Major League Baseball team from Cleveland Indians to the Cleveland Guardians. I don't know where this could just be a little flicker of culture war, or if this is something he wants to kind of stick with for a while. He does have a little bit of leverage with the Washington team because the land where they're going to build the new stadium, which was the same size as the old stadium, is leased by the federal government to the district under a 99-year lease. He could try to, do a rescissions number on that too. So I'm curious about this little bauble of distraction, which is actually a big deal to a lot of people.
Paul, Bill?
Well, I don't know that it's going to play out in the next few days, but it'll play out over the next few weeks, perhaps. And that is the battle over redistricting. Donald Trump wants Texas to redistrict in a way that would make it harder for Democrats to take back the House in 2026. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, says if Texas does that, he's going to push for a redistricting that limits, that strips the handful of Republican districts in California, and other Democratic governors and legislators are saying they might do the same thing. So it's a giant game of chicken. And who has the power to do what, I'm not really sure, but it's certainly worth keeping an eye on.
This is not quite this week, but perhaps going into next week. The Senate is supposed to end their summer session at the end of July, and Trump is demanding they extend it to get more of his nominations approved, including judges.
Mm-hmm.
So do Republicans really want summer vacation, or do they want to kowtow to Trump? It's another test of presidential loyalty to keep an eye on over the next several days.
Right. And among them potentially is Emile Beauvais, who was the subject of a letter signed by more than 900 former Justice Department lawyers, demanding that he not be confirmed to a lifetime federal appointment on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. So that will be interesting to watch.
And whether he has the votes or not might come into play, whether Thune, the majority leader, says, is it worth extending the session if we can't even get this guy through?
Right.
The Monthly was the first to say, watch him for the Supreme Court vacancy if one arises during Trump's term, because now that Trump's fighting with Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society, he's no longer going to the Kavanaugh model of a justice. He's going to go to a pure loyalist, and Beauvais fits that like a glove.
Well, I'm looking forward to speaking with economist Rob Shapiro for this week's podcast, who is going to share his forecast on the U.S. economy. And he has a terrific piece up this morning as well at WashingtonMonthly.com. So thank you guys for joining the Politics Roundtable this week. I'm Ann Kim, joined today by Paul Glastris, Editor-in-Chief of the Monthly, Politics Editor Bill Scher, Executive Editor for Digital Matt Cooper. Have a great week, everyone, and see you next time.
Thanks, Ann.
Thank you.
Take care.